Hey everybody, how is everybody doing today? We have got the Mac Show in the house. The Mac Show, Massive Abundance Exposed, where we expose the badass secrets of amazing entrepreneurs from all over the world, especially realtors and their friends. And we've got the most amazing friend of realtors today on our show, Mr. Dan Custer of Bank of the West, one of the preeminent mortgage lenders here in San Francisco and on the West Coast. Dan has got a varied background, started off as an attorney, went into mortgage lending, and has some amazing stories and amazing things that realtors should be doing, that realtors should be saying, how they should be acting, who they should be doing. Anyways, I'm really hoping that you enjoyed today's show with Dan Custer. Before you do, make sure you sign in to massiveabundance.co. Get yourself all kinds of free goodies. And without further ado, let's get on with the show. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. Dan Custer in the house. Dan, how you doing?
Very well, Chris. How are you?
I am honored for you being here. I'm so happy that you're here because one of the things that I think I put in our show notes is that, and I have worked with you myself personally, that you're probably one of the successful loan brokers, loan agents that I have worked with ever in my entire life. And there are some pretty great agents out there. But you have an uncanny ability to sort of get your agents to work a certain way with you. What do you think, Dan, is the most important, how can I say, relationship? How do you conduct that relationship with a realtor? What do you expect from a realtor to have a real productive relationship?
Well, I think what needs to always be remembered is that if you're working with a realtor or a realtor is working with a loan officer or a mortgage banker, that you're partners in whatever transaction it is. And some transactions are very easy, some transactions go through very smoothly, but lots of them don't. And it's really important to have that partnership because then you have an ally. So the realtors that I work with, such as yourself and Terry, are my partners, and I think that I am theirs. And those are the partnerships that make the business actually fun. And business should be fun because we spend a lot of time doing the business that we do.
And I think that's a great analogy, having the partnership, because I know that there are some real estate agents that don't do that. Like, keeping in mind that this is a show mostly for real estate agents, mostly real estate brokers and entrepreneurs. What have been some of your horror stories? What's a relationship what type of realtor just really pisses you off?
Well, I haven't had too many that I've worked with personally on my side of the deal, but I've certainly been in situations where, for instance, the listing agent is just a pain in the neck and creates such a level of hostility through the whole transaction. Everybody is undergoing so much more stress than is necessary. So those are not the kinds of agents that I want to work with. And fortunately, I haven't found there to be too many of those, but we all know that they exist. So the ones that I want to work with and the ones that I've been lucky enough to work with are the ones who always want to find a solution to any problem, whether it's getting something as simple as getting an extension or changing the transaction in some way so it will work. One of the things that I love about being at Bank of the West is that I have way more ability to come up with solutions if, for instance, borrowers have a financing contingency. And you and I have worked on transactions where they don't have enough cash to close, or they don't have enough reserves, or whatever. And one thing that most people don't realize, in addition to the fact that many of the people in the real estate community don't realize that Bank of the West does a lot of mortgage business. But we are one of the only banks left that still does 80-10-10 transactions. And in San Francisco, where prices are so high, you have many borrowers who have lots and lots of income and can qualify for an $800, $900 million loan, but they don't necessarily have $250,000 for a down payment. So for them and for you as realtors, it's really important for you to know that there is a solution and we have it.
Got it. I got it. That's good to know. Now, you come off as a very professional guy. You are very professional looking, very handsome.
Thank you so much.
But what most people don't know about you is that you are pretty much of a cool, crazy cat, and you like to have fun. What are some of the telltale signs that you know working with a real estate broker that there's going to be a problem?
Well, how about focusing on the positive? How about focusing on the ones that we know there's not going to be a problem?
Okay, then let's talk about me.
Okay. Well, you're one of the people that I was talking about earlier. You never get upset. Well, you may get upset, but you don't let being upset keep you from trying to figure out a solution.
Right.
And those are the people that I like, rather than the people who just go into immediate reaction when the smallest little thing doesn't go quite correctly. For instance, we're going to be 1 day late on getting the appraisal back. Well, so what? Nobody died. 1 day late for the appraisal getting back. It's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But you've had those situations, as I have, where somebody in the transaction has an absolute fit because we're 1 day late on getting something back. That's not saying that Bank of the West is bad about getting appraisals back, but things do happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess to answer your question is, I love working with people who just say, that's not a problem, we'll work through it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the privilege last week of closing a transaction with a realtor, and it was a very difficult transaction. The appraisal did not come in at purchase price, so that was a huge problem. The borrower was short funds to close.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big problem. She was so fantastic, she never let any of those things bother her, and she just kept saying, we'll find a solution. And we did, and we closed. And that was a perfect example of what I was talking about, where we took care of the cash to close problem by giving him a small second for purchase.
Wow.
And it worked perfectly.
Dan, how long have you been in the business?
Well, Chris, as you remember, I practiced law in San Francisco for many, many, many years before I got into the mortgage business. I got into the mortgage business while I was still practicing law back in '97.
Mm-hmm.
And then I closed my law practice in 2000 and became a full-time loan officer, starting out at Washington Mutual.
Mm-hmm.
So my law practice was primarily real estate and business, so it was a very fun transition to get into mortgage.
Cool, great. And what do you see? Do you have like a next big vision or a next big plan? I mean, again, we're going to show everybody your website, but working with Bank of the West, you work with a great company, great group of people. Do you have some big grandiose vision or plan for yourself?
Well, for myself, in the context of what I'm trying to do at Bank of the West, one of the reasons that I was hired at Bank of the West was to increase our visibility in the real estate community in San Francisco, and that really is my goal for the next year. It's started to be successful last year, but I'm really hoping that with the purchase market the way it is, that we can really get out there and let people know what we can do.
Mm-hmm.
We have a huge focus on purchase business. When we have a purchase, the bank and the mortgage banking division takes it very seriously. So, for instance, if you have certain conditions that you need to have happen, like a shorter close of escrow, for instance, we will work with you at our maximum capacity to make sure that that happens.
Got it. And it's interesting because, you're an entrepreneur just like the rest of us. It's like if you don't do the business, you're not putting bread on the table, so to speak.
Exactly.
And as an entrepreneur, what are the typical types of things that you like to do the best? What in terms of you running your business?
Well, I'm sorry, I had a little interruption there. Beg your pardon. Well, in terms of growing the business this year, this is a perfect example of the kinds of things that I would like to do more of and like to see the bank doing more of, because we really need to get the exposure. People who know about Bank of the West love us, but I can't tell you how many people say, I love Bank of the West, but I never knew you did mortgages. Well, mortgage is one of our biggest focuses.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to come up with more possibilities like this, and I so appreciate your giving me this opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to try to get the word out there that we do a really good job. Our rates are competitive. Our processing is very helpful. We don't torture our clients the way some banks do,
Mm-hmm.
and I won't mention which ones, but you know whom I'm talking about. And we make the process generally pretty nice, pretty stress-free. Obviously, there are situations like the one I mentioned that aren't stress-free,
Mm-hmm.
but we get through them. The other thing that the real estate community needs to know is that in addition to Bank of the West still doing 80-10-10, we still portfolio some loans. So if your clients meet certain criteria, if we can't sell the loan, we'll keep it. And a perfect example of that is a condominium situation that I had just last week. The condo questionnaire came back, and one person owned more than 10% of the units. Now, as you probably know, that's a Fannie Mae no-no.
Mm-hmm.
We kept the loan. We charged the borrower a slightly higher rate, and they were still saving so much money over their old loan that they were perfectly happy. But we portfolioed that transaction. So that's something very important for you folks to know as well.
Right, and for those entrepreneurs out there that are wondering about portfolio lending, it's all about keeping the loans in-house so that maybe you are a little more flexible in terms of your lending guidelines. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Got it.
Precisely. So since 2008, as everybody knows, the lending criteria have become so much more difficult. So most of the banks, the large banks, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Chase, Citibank, they sell 100% of their loans. They don't portfolio anything.
Mm-hmm.
Portfolio lenders are Bank of the West to a certain extent. First Republic to a huge extent. That's pretty much all they do.
Mm-hmm.
And one or two other institutions.
I think that the cool thing that I love about portfolio lenders too is, like you alluded to earlier, is just the customer service. I mean, you don't have those real stringent guidelines, and you also tend to talk to real people. And that's one of the things that I like about working with you is I've got your cell phone number, and you actually answer it.
Well, when I see it's you, I usually don't, but most of the time I do.
I love it. So, you just like every other entrepreneur, like I'm an entrepreneur. I mean, it sounds like marketing is a real big part. Getting your name out there, getting your company's name out there is a huge part of the business that you're doing. And is there anything else that you feel like you could be doing in terms of your marketing efforts that maybe you're not doing right now?
Well, one of the things that's the most difficult to preface the answer is just getting the time to market, because, as you know, that's the hardest thing to come up with, especially if you're busy as I am, doing $4 or $5 or $6 million worth of business a month.
Right.
It's hard to find the time to market. So one of the things, as you know, and as Terry knows, that I like to do is I really try every week to either go out on tour or to host an open house with some of my realtors.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great way to make contact with people. It's a great way to keep your name out there. It's a great way to run into realtors whom you know but you don't see very often.
Mm-hmm.
I was at an open house a few weeks ago and ran into a realtor whom I hadn't seen for years. And it was so great to see her, and we have about 20 minutes to catch up.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. It's just great. So I really do try to make sure that on Tuesday is pretty sacrosanct as far as getting out there, going around. One of the things that I have liked doing is going out on tour by yourself isn't the most fun thing. Parking in and of itself is a pain.
Especially in the city of
So lots of times I like to go out with my realtor partners,
mm-hmm.
and if there's a place that one of us wants to see but the parking's impossible, one of us can stay in the car and, wait, and then the other person comes back and you can run in. it just makes the day a lot more fun and interesting. So I try to encourage my realtor partners to do that with me.
Mm-hmm.
And once they do it, it's so much more fun than going out by yourself that
Mm-hmm.
they always want to do it some more.
Right, right. And is it also important for you as a loan agent to also know the inventory, to figure out?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do a lot of pre-approvals for people. So, I do pre-approvals for you. I do pre-approvals for a lot of my other agents. Sometimes they haven't necessarily seen something. And once in a while, I will see something when I'm out on tour, and I'll call and say, did you happen to see such and such a property?
Mm-hmm.
That's a great example of working as a partner.
Mm. Now, just out of curiosity, Dan, I'm always fascinated by this because, again, Bank of the West, top producer, how many loans can you handle at once? Maybe what's the most number of loans that you handle? Because that always never ceases to amaze me that you can keep your business going and still have...
Well, as recently as December, I probably had 30 loans in my pipeline. Now, all of those, granted, were not purchases.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a few of them were purchases. Refinances, particularly when you're in a big refinance boom like we still are because rates continue to be so low, refinances have to take second priority after purchases.
Mm-hmm.
So the bank and mortgage banking at Bank of the West, and this is true for all lenders, take purchase transactions and prioritize them.
Mm-hmm.
So I could have a refinance that I'm doing for somebody, and it may have been in the system for 30 days,
Mm-hmm.
and the clients want to close. Too bad. If a purchase comes in, we're going to make sure that the purchase gets taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to your question, I've never reached a point where I had too many loans.
Mm-hmm.
You always just deal with it. If you have to work till midnight, you work till midnight.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to get up at 5 in the morning, you get up at 5 in the morning. Because it's not always going to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
Next week or next month, you may have a lull where you only have, say, 10 loans in your pipeline. Then
are you working with? Are you working with? Excuse me, I'm sorry. Are you working with an assistant?
My Bank of the West is set up a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have an assistant in San Francisco. I have several processors who work in Omaha, which is where our main headquarters is,
mm-hmm.
and they are assigned to me. So they basically act as my assistants. For instance, Linda, she's my credit processor,
mm-hmm.
she will help me collect all of the conditions at the outset of a loan.
Mm-hmm.
I have another assistant who works only on purchases. Her name is Michelle. She got 5 purchases closed on time in the last week. And, she works for me and she works for 1 or 2 other mortgage brokers. And then we have closing processors who, after the loan has been underwritten,
mm-hmm.
they take care of getting anything else that's necessary, like insurance. So I basically have a lot of assistants. I have 3 or 4. They're just not local.
Mm-hmm.
But we are very technologically advanced in terms of our processing, in terms of our ability to send things back and forth
mm-hmm.
within the system. So it really doesn't make any difference that they're not physically present in my office.
Got it. What's the fastest you've ever closed a loan?
Well, let's see. 2 of those last 5 we closed in 18 days.
18 days. Wow.
18 days, start to finish.
That's pretty amazing.
Well, and what people don't realize is that with all the Dodd-Frank and new RESPA regulations and things, you can't close a loan too much faster than that because of all of the disclosure requirements.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a loan involved, you're kind of stuck.
Mm-hmm.
So but every transaction that I've had since I've been at Bank of the West that was supposed to close in 30 days, every purchase, we were ready to close in 20.
Wow, that's amazing.
I had a $2 million transaction in January, and I think we took the application around the 19th of December. We were ready to close before New Year's, but the sellers didn't want to move out that fast. So my poor buyer had to wait.
I love it. A hypothetical question for you, Mr. Custer, and that
Yes.
would be, if you were starting all over as a lender right now,
Uh-huh.
and you knew now, then what would you do differently?
Oh, that's a hard question. Uh, hmm. Well, the first few years that I was in the business full time, I was at Washington Mutual, and that was back in the day when Washington Mutual was in its heyday and everybody loved them. And It was a great place to work. I don't think I necessarily would have gone to, when I left WAMU, I don't necessarily think I would have gone where I went, and I won't mention where I went. That was something that I would probably do differently. And one or two other places that I've worked, I wouldn't necessarily want to repeat. But, those are all learning experiences. So you glean from those experiences what you can and try to think, well, I should have done that, or I should.
Right, right.
The other answer to your question is, I probably wouldn't have waited so long to get into the mortgage business as I did. I probably would have stopped practicing law maybe 5 or 6 years sooner and gotten into this business earlier. That's one thing I kind of regret.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, and I do know that I've known you for a while, and I've known you working in other companies, and being in the mortgage business that you are always just top producer. You're doing something right. You're getting these loans done, and you're absolutely making people happy in the process, which sometimes I wonder how that is even possible with some of the stories of people that you've told me about. But you've got the.
Well, I don't have any children, so I don't go home and beat them. I'm fairly mean to you on occasion, and that helps. Other than that, it just sort of. I think it's also a function of age. It really is. When things get bad in this business, you have to remember nobody died.
I love that. Nobody died. And with that, Dan Custer, thank you so much. It's no wonder that you're such a successful mortgage person, and all of your information, your website, your email will be in the show notes. Thank you so much. I'm honored you took the time to join us today. And everybody remember that no matter how bad it is, nobody died. Thanks,
nobody died. Thanks, Chris.
Hey, all you cool cats, thanks so much for joining us. I thought that was just amazing. Dan Custer, who has this very, very professional demeanor, is one of the craziest, coolest cats that you'll ever meet. Make sure you take him out and buy him a drink one night, because he's got some great advice on how all of us realtors should be acting, what we should be saying, and how he can be putting deals together and closing loans in 8 days. That is absolutely mind-blowing. Professional from all different levels. I really appreciate having Dan on the show. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope that you enjoyed listening to Dan. And definitely get in touch with him. Dan, all of his contact information will be in the show notes, so make sure you reach out to him, ask him any other questions that you have. Feel free to reach out to me, leave me some love down below, and thanks again so much for joining us. And don't forget to sign in at themassiveabundance.co so that you can get all kinds of free goodies for yourself. Again, Chris Stafford here with Massive Abundance. Thanks so much.